Feels like we're back in school. We're getting homework.
Well, it's important to have this. There's all the information you never need.
Yep, that just looks bad. That looks expensive. Is yours the same as mine?
I've got that. Got that. Got that.
Oh,
I got a lot of those.
Yeah, I got a whole bunch of those.
You don't have a boring. I've got the instruction manual for one.
So we're talking about cylinders and how to know if you need to have your cylinder serviced, let's say, right? And most of it comes down to measurements, where everything comes down to. And your best resource here is all the charts that are in all the service manuals. So if you flip in this thing for a minute, let's go to like page 5. We'll start there. Most people work on L model tractors, and this is from the, I like the 7.6 service manual. I think that's the nicest one, kind of the newest one that they have. And you see this Gravely technician with a lab coat and a tie working on these things.
Where's your coat and tie? Come on.
But the bottom line is that, like I brought a cylinder here, for example. When you think about the average tractor that we're dealing with is probably at least 50 years old, right? If not 60 years old.
Class.
Back to class here. Gravely gives you this chart down here of dimensions. They're not totally scientific dimensions. They're really a guide as to where things should be. The real dimensions have to do with the clearance you have between your piston and the bore, right? So like this is a 30 over piston. This is a standard bore. You can't even put that in there, right? Because it won't fit. This is a standard piston here, and that will fit in there. There's a lot of play in there, you see that? So if you refer to the charts in here, they'll tell you the specifications about what this piston to bore clearance should be, okay? And Gravely gives you this chart as kind of a general rule of thumb. If you were to measure it, that it would probably be in that range. Wait, I was hoping the tractor would be.
All right, I got that one in the shot. Good.
Okay. This is from a Kohler service manual. This is from the older Kohler service manual, which actually has better illustrations than the newer service manual. But they'll show you up here, you see where it says thrust face on the piston. That's where you would measure your piston, is on the thrust face. And if you look at it, it's right below the lowest ring. Okay? So that's where you would measure your piston. To measure your piston, you use something like this micrometer. So, you measure that, okay? If you go back another page, to the page before that, they have all these specifications up here for Kohlers. And it will tell you piston, the thrust face, will tell you what sizes that can be for the different Kohler pistons. It tells you up the first line cylinder bore, max taper, max outer ground. So the other problem we get is that when the piston's in here and it's on the connecting rod, as it gets to the bottom, it tends to want to go wider than it is on the top, okay? So chances are, if you were to measure any cylinder, there's a taper, meaning that if you measure on the top and the middle and the bottom, it's not all the same diameter. That's from where? Yep. And if you read the Model L service manual, it'll tell you a crude way to do it.
Whoever sits closest to this tractor is taking it home.
Dick, you got another tractor then.
Manual will tell you a crude way to make that taper by taking a ring and putting it in the top and putting the feeler gauge on and looking at the gap. take the ring and put it at the bottom and in the middle, and look at what the gap is. If it increased more than the specification, then it's out of service. It needs to be serviced. The Kohler can do the same thing. But these charts here are the most important part of this whole process. And understanding the theory of when it needs to happen. On page 8 is a very detailed Kohler chart from the newer 1972 Kohler manual. Sorry, 1992 Kohler manual. All of these printouts came from the manuals on the club's website, the manual website. But in here, there's a cylinder bore section. If you look at it, it'll say max taper. And on the little engines, like the 4 to 8 horse, it's 3 thousandths, and on the 10 to 16, it's only 2 thousandths, right? So that's not a lot of taper. That's a very small amount. So if it's anything more than that, Kohler is saying you need to service the cylinder. And that's 2 thousandths is pretty much nothing. The bore clearance. That's what I was talking about earlier. The Kohler has a very big clearance. On the most of the engines, it's 7 to 10 thousandths. Engine builders will say that they have a rule of thumb that they go like 1,000th per inch of bore. So if you had a 3-inch cylinder, they would think it's 3 thousandths. I made the mistake of bringing a Kohler to an engine builder once, but I gave him this printout thinking that he was smart enough to follow the rules, right? I know the Lancer was I love him. Yeah, so is he?
I'll have to edit that out.
So anyways, the guy did it his way. And if it's a 3 1/4 inch bore, he made it 3 1/4 thousandths. With a Kohler, aluminum piston, whatever, it heats up a lot. And I ran that along for about 3 minutes and it started to lock up. And you were driving that tractor, the 432.
Ah, yes.
And that was the problem. So I had to take it back to him and give him the chart and say, look, you didn't do what you're supposed to do, and he had to redo it for me.
Just because I was operating it when it started, it had nothing to do with it.
On the Model L, it's a much smaller clearance. It really is like the 3.5 thousandths clearance. So that's really the key to this whole thing. And here we have some measuring tools. This is a dial bore gauge. And the way that this works is that there's all these different blank pieces here. You got to find the right piece to make it fit in your bore. So if I'm working on this thing and it's 3 point something, like you just got to find the right one that screws in there that fits properly, okay? And that's how you would measure it. This isn't the right top, but this one's a digital one, and it actually has a digital readout that will go in there. You put it in there and move it back and forth and find the measurement. The digital one might be
Yeah, it's in the box. Yeah.
We can measure a cylinder if you want. I'll show you how it works.
A good apple.
But with this bore gauge, let's just play with it for real here. I bought this online. There's a bunch of companies that sell the same exact one in the red case under different names. It might be $100 or $125, something like that.
All made in China.
Yeah, made in China. So if you're doing a bunch of cylinders and you want to understand where they're really at, it's a worthwhile investment. If I was doing one cylinder, I probably would be looking at that taper on the ring and not buying expensive tools and just bringing it to a machine shop. And if you brought the chart with them, they could quickly look at it and say, okay, it's in that range. You probably need this size piston. And you always want to buy the piston first and then bring it to the machine shop, and they'll measure the piston and then they'll make the bore fit with the right clearance for the piston. It's a mistake to look at that chart and say, oh, it says it's 3.26 inches, and bring it in and have them machine it without having the piston. That's a no-no. Let me see if I can find the right one here for the one that we're working on here.
Do you find telescoping gauges and OD mics acceptable to measure a bore accurate enough?
I do, and it's very hard to have this thing square in there. You can wobble it side to side very easily. They give you these little spacers so that when you're kind of in between the sizes, you got to put a spacer in there. Let's see if this one will fit. Yeah, so I'm at the right spot now. The next thing that you have to do is you have to calibrate this. This thing is just, right, when you push down on this, it's measured. So it needs a starting point. It doesn't know where the heck it is. So you would take your micrometer and you'd set it to whatever you want your starting point to be. And then you put it in there and measure it. So if you want to measure it, we'll get a starting point here. I'm going to maybe set it to 3 1/4, let's say. Turn this thing on. Oh, I took the battery out. Hold on.
Oh, geez, I'll have to edit this out.
So this thing is a digital gauge, and you have to set it, go through the settings, and tell it that you're starting at 3 1/4, or wherever we want to start here. Just bear with me if I can remember how to do that.
Oh, geez. More editing. I just started.
I'm just going to zero it out at 3 1/4. I won't go through the effort of making it the real measurement. And we can illustrate the taper and everything. It's kind of a trick to get it in here. You got to hit zero it out.
It's telling us we gotta be a rocket scientist.
Okay, so it's zeroed out at 3 1/4 inches. If we were to come and look at the top, so on here, it's negative 0.02. If I had actually told it that it started at 3.25, it would say it's 3.23, let's say, right? But if I look up here, again, the measurement is relative. I'm at 0205. If I go down to the bottom, I'm at 0130. So this thing is it's tapered like 10 thousandths or more, right? So it's way out of that range of where it's supposed to be. So without even doing any other work, I know right away that this cylinder needs to be serviced. The next thing is that I think I brought one that's grooved. If you look in here, I'll bring it around so you can see these marks that are going up and down? There's a big one on the side there. Grooves. Big grooves. I'm sure you guys like big grooves, right? Big grooves going up and down. Scoring, whatever you want to call it, right? Grooves.
Oh yeah, we see it.
Right? See those grooves? Oh yeah. So, what makes those grooves? Well, probably dirt getting in there is the biggest culprit, right? So, one time I had a Briggs, and a lot of you guys know Rusty. I sold it to him. He was going to rebuild it. He knew that going into it. But the owner that had the engine before me, there's like a little Welch plug on the air cleaner, and it fell off. And this guy mowed his lawn with it in the dusty environment, sucked all the dust into the carburetor, and bypassed the air filter basically, right? Think about an old Model L with the snake around tube. How many guys need to start their tractor with ether or whatever they do, and the tube's not on there, and you just start using it? Imagine doing something really dusty like plowing a garden or something like that. How close that carburetor is to the source of the dirt. You look at things like snow blowers, old Aaron snow blowers. They don't have air filters. In winter, there's not really dust in the air from just blowing snow. So maybe those machines aren't going to get wiped out. But dirt is the primary culprit. You cannot measure those grooves with this tool. An experienced machinist can kind of take his thumbnail and put it in there and say, oh, I think that groove is 10 thousandths or something. So if you got one that's totally grooved out, the question is, are the grooves so deep that you're beyond the 30 thousandths over on your piston, and then you're shot at that point, you know? I don't know if GT Gravely used to sell a 40 over piston.
60.
And a 50 and 60 or
Hey,
something.
we'll go clear to 60 now.
I don't know if he still
Somebody
sells
does
those.
sleeving also.
And their sleeves. With Kohler engines, they made up to a 30 thousandths by 10 thousandths increments. Gravely made up to 30 with 5 thousandths increments. You can buy aftermarket Kohler pistons that go up to 40. I've never seen them go past 40. But once you get to that point, the only thing you can do is have a sleeve put in, and they'll machine out the whole cylinder and drop the sleeve in there, and you start from standard size again, you know? But in my experience with Kohler engines, every one I've ever had to go to a 20 thousandths over piston when I brought in a standard bore to start with. There's some people that will not really care about the measurements and just put rings in there like Steve. And just the reality is that if you ran your tractor once a year to come to the moment, it's probably fine. Right?
Like Steve.
If you were a commercial, you know, landscaper using this machine 8 hours a day, it's not fine, you know. Somewhere there's a happy medium there.
Ralph,
Yeah.
you want one that was just bored? I got one up in my truck.
It doesn't. No, it's all right. It's okay. But that's really the main theory behind everything. You know. Now boring. That's another thing.
Bragging
Talk
that you're
about
wealthy.
boring. So
Yeah.
Like
go
having
back to
lumber in the
that
back of your
page
truck.
in the back where the. Let's start from the front now.
I was just ready to say, someone tell that guy's got a flat trailer tire.
So I showed you the micrometer, the bore gauge. Feeler gauges would be used for checking the rings with the taper, like I mentioned. If you go to the next page, this is just a random Google photo of scoring. Sometimes scoring happens. There's sometimes where the clips on the piston pin come out, and I've seen them wipe out the side of the cylinder. Sometimes a ring breaks or a ring gets stuck. That kind of stuff can happen. I work on a lot of rusty stuff that sat outside for 30 years and try to get that kind of stuff going. You'll have times when someone left the machine outside without a spark plug in and it filled with water, or came in through the muffler and filled with water. Someone out here has an Onan engine. Those are horizontal cylinders. They got filled with water, and the bottom of the cylinders is all pitted. It's worthless. You can't fix it. It's beyond the range of the 30 thousandths, you know. But this here is what most automotive machine shops will use, is something like the Sun and Power Home. What most guys will tell you is that, you know, you hear, I don't know if a lot of you guys are online, but people talk about boring cylinders. If I went in there and I had a V8 engine, they'll use a boring bar and they'll literally bore it, and it will be maybe 2 or 3 thousandths from the final size, and they'll use a hone to get it to the final size. I've
Follow the battery
4
power,
or 5
guys.
machine shops over the last 10 years. Every single one of them will use the hone to do the engine, and they'll say that the setup time for the boring machine is too much to do one cylinder. If you're doing a whole pile of them at once, it would make sense. But to just do one cylinder, that power hone is very powerful. Oil shooting into it, it goes up and down all by itself. They can take off 20 thousandths really easy. So they'll use that. And the hone, you've all seen these hones that you put in a drill, they're like spring-loaded. It's not that kind of hone. It's what they call a rigid hone. And it has stones that come down. I actually have a picture of it here. Maybe on the next page. This is one that you can buy, and it's, you know, I bought one a few years ago. It was $105. I looked this week, and now it's up to $150. But you can buy these readily on Amazon, at your local auto parts store, pretty much anywhere. And you can run it in a drill. If you wanted to do it yourself, you could do it. And in my experience, I'm from Connecticut, prices are different everywhere, but to bring a single cylinder engine to a machine shop, number one, you have to have a machine shop, there's not many around. Number two, you have to find one that will work on something that's not a car engine. But most guys will do a cylinder for like 90 or 100 bucks or something like that. So it's well worth just going to the expert and saying, here's what I got, tell me what size piston I need, and let them do it. But that's kind of the drill there. And you know, if you buy this hone, you need to use honing oil while you're honing it also. Honing oil is very expensive. I've looked it up, and it could be $100 for a gallon.
What makes it so expensive, Ralph?
I don't know what makes it so expensive. I really don't.
I'm going to get in the business then.
Yeah. But if you go in the back here on page 9, this is from the older Kohler manual. And if you go on the website, there's a newer one that's from 92. The older one, I don't know what year it is, I don't remember, but it says April of 72. On the website it says something in the parentheses like it's good for the starter generator pullers. They show the guy using the rigid hone to do the block. And all these people online will say, oh, you can't do that with a hone. Well, yes, you can. The keyboard warriors are out of work, as they say, you know. So the idea of this class wasn't that you could physically go and hone your cylinder. It was to give you the knowledge to know enough that you can talk intelligently about it to either your engine shop, or if you wanted to buy all these fancy tools, you could do it yourself, but that's the basic knowledge. Anybody have any questions that we didn't cover?